Oh, okay. So we had Laura had mentioned that we had
Sorry about
started.
that. I meant to hit record earlier. I'm sorry. Okay.
Um, well, that happens. So, anyway, so Laura had mentioned that we had started talking about wanting to not have the We Are Here exhibition be a one-off. We both talked about how representation matters, and it was important to the museum and to me, and it I feel like we've become friends through these conversations. And we had a lot of emails, and they were really wonderful ways of getting to know one another and also to refine the vision. It's a small show, and it is a show that is only open for a month. So if you are in the area, or if you're passing through, I highly recommend checking it out. I was there for the opening day, and it is a beautiful collection of art. And it's a really special show at a special place. Um, so the other thing that I wanted to mention is that for I want to thank the artists for participating in this show, because without you, this would not be possible at all. And also, again, to thank the Metal Museum and the sponsors who have made this possible. I had a lot of conversations with different artists throughout the process of curating the show, and some of them felt a little bit reluctant to putting their work in the show. And I think it really hit home that this is still a relevant conversation and something that some of them were afraid that if they had purposely crafted their career to be non-political and to shy away from showing anything that could be considered political. And they had concerns about retaliation or being considered difficult. And that really put things in perspective. So for the artists who did decide to show, and I respect that. You have to do what's best for you and your career. But I want to thank all of the artists for being brave and showing and self-identifying. This is one of those things where you don't know unless you know. And we kind of had to, a lot of conversations went around about like, who was going to be in the exhibit. And it was important to me to represent a very wide cross section of the LGBTQIA plus, I'll say queer community to make it a little bit easier. So it was important to me to show that because it is such a diverse and beautifully, everybody is different, and it is something that is beautiful. And the material metal is also something that is really diverse, and it's something that can, even though an artist can work in metal, many artists work in metal, all of their work looks different. And so I thought it was like a perfect material to talk about these things. Now, the reason why we kind of dialed down and specifically focused on queer metalsmiths and blacksmiths and makers who work in metal is that it's a very broad topic. And so the idea of home is something that intrigues me because we all have some kind of connection to it, or we don't have a connection to it. And I thought it was particularly poignant because um, that the queer community historically has had kind of an interesting relationship as being a marginalized community. And yeah. So the slideshow that's up right now that's going through features all of the work that's in the show. And I don't know if any of the artists are interested in hopping on and maybe talking about their work a little bit. Because, this is a curatorial talk, and um, I definitely want to talk about the process of curating this, but I also, if the artists are here and if they're willing, I would love to hear their stories behind the pieces because I know my interpretations. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that happens with an exhibition is that I think really successful exhibitions are ones that ask a question, and then the artwork that is selected and shown attempts to address that. So all of these pieces, and you'll notice there's a wide range of sculpture and body adornment and functional wear and more conceptually based work. So it's all different facets to ask the question of what home means to a queer um, maker who works in metal. Do we have any artists who want to talk for a couple minutes about their pieces? And if not, that's okay too. I can just um, ramble on about the different pieces because, I love all of the pieces that were selected for the show. I think that there is a really beautiful cross section of work, and I think that's really wonderful. So, Laura, do we have any artists who are watching who want to talk or no?
I haven't gotten any messages, but I wonder if Joe Bennett might be willing to talk about their piece.
Joe, are you with us? I feel kind of like in a seance, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if not, I'll talk about,
Okay.
are you ready?
Joe, Anne said that they're willing to talk towards the end.
Okay.
Okay. And then Jacob and Matt are both here as well, and Robin.
Okay. Well, maybe if you can either say, like, hey, I want to talk, in the chat or raise your hand, then we can find the slide and pull it up. Um,
Okay,
since
I think
we're,
Robin, sorry, I think Robin is wanting to talk about this piece.
oh, good, good.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can say a little bit. It's going to be rambling, chaotic. Wasn't ready for this, but I can ramble.
Oh, good. So what were this piece was created specifically for the show, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And what was your inspiration behind that?
Honestly, this was one of those that I didn't know how it was going to fit until the very end. It was just a lot of ideas I had had in my head, wanted to play with the hard shell of the solid, the more soft with the perforated, and then the forged pieces down there. It wasn't until I was showing my classmate, I'm still a student at the Building Arts College, showed my classmate the piece, and he said, "Why do you have it on the table? Make it stand up." I was like, somehow in my head, it was supposed to be lying flat, kind of out of his element, something like that. That was the first point where it made sense of how this relates to me. If that makes sense. Me and my identity as a queer artist.
Wonderful. So, I first met Robin kind of virtually. We had both won scholarships through the Society of Inclusive Blacksmiths, which is a really wonderful organization. And if you aren't aware of them, I highly suggest checking them out. Um, and one of the first pieces that I saw of Robin's work was a succulent. And One of the things that struck me about that is that succulents are, they thrive in the harshest of conditions, and they still have a beauty to them, and they, um, all organisms thrive in optimal conditions, and I feel like this is a metaphor for queerness, and through the adversity we're able to kind of bloom. And when you created this piece, I really loved it because it felt almost like a shell for something that was very fragile and kind of ephemeral, and that kind of lace work that's coming out. And so that shell is, in my interpretation, is kind of a protective structure. Um, and something that seems fragile is actually very sturdy and resilient. And, it's also kind of protected in a way that there are, I don't know if appendage is the right word, but there are structures coming off of it.
Little tails. I'm not sure what to call them either.
Yeah, so I think you did a
Yeah.
really wonderful job. And I love that, as you mentioned, you're a student, and we have people from all ranges of their careers. And so I'm so excited to see what you're going to do next. And hopefully, we continue to see more.
Yeah, Sam, I'm again said it a million times, but so glad to be included in this.
Well, thank you so
Great friend.
much. Do you have any other artists who would like to speak on their work?
I think Jacob is ready. Let me pull that piece up.
Wonderful.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had some Zoom difficulties. So yeah, the show must go on. Giving up is not an option. I'm really thankful to be in this exhibition, for you to reach out to me, and those conversations that we really had, they were really meaningful when we were out and about in Memphis after the exhibition. We are here. I know they kind of inspired you, but they really inspired me to kind of push this work. The show must go on is really a celebration of resilience. And sorry, it's an ode to many drag performers, but specifically this piece sparked by the the house mother in Birmingham. And
For those who don't know what a house mother is, what's a house mother?
so a house mother takes in baby drag queens, amateur drag queens, and they really open up a safe space for upcoming drag performers and queer culture to blossom, right? And they take them under their wing and really hone in their skills and let them fly, really. So this is like a kind of representation of the struggles and triumphs. So the Iron Cup was cast in Birmingham specifically as one of my very first Iron cast years and years ago. And I thought it was really crucial for that to be in here because Birmingham is another home to me. That's where I kind of really found myself. It wasn't until I now live in Denton, Texas, but it wasn't until I really found a place there in Birmingham, and like a shelter to kind of blossom myself, that I came out as a queer, as a gay man, as a queer, identifying.
Wonderful. So, I'm a dish the tea. And so after the exhibition, we went out and I got a text message and they're like, "You want to come out?" And I was like, "Okay." But I didn't actually know it was you who text messaged me. So that was a surprise, but it was a delightful one. And we had been talking, and one of the things that was interesting to me, and I that you had talked about being in different clubs and nightclubs, and I had also had a similar experience. And I think for people who may not be a part of the queer community or identify as gay, they may not know that bars and places like that have historically been safe havens for queer individuals. If you know anything about like gay history and queer history, you know that the Stonewall riots were a really big shifting point in representation and conversations. Um, Being a part of a marginalized community, oftentimes our perspectives and our lives are kind of swept under the rug and, marginalized. So the Stonewall riots happened in a bar and were kind of spearheaded by transgender people and people of color. And it was a really big turning point for us as a community, I think. And also, a part of that is those safe havens for people who don't necessarily have a home life that is welcoming. Um, that's also a place that is a safe haven, which is a really lovely thing. It is with all things there are kind of positives and negatives to everything, but um, I think how this piece fits in this show is that the nightlife has been a place that is a home for queer people, and also it is a place that encourages and promotes creativity. Some of the most colorful and vibrant people I know are a part of that space. So thank you, Jacob, for creating a beautiful piece that, because I had a couple questions from people who were like, how does this fit in? And I think it's one of those things where I think it speaks specifically to your lived in experience and a common experience to a lot of people. And I think that's a very special thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Um, and are there any other artists who want to take an opportunity to talk on their work?
Sure, I'll talk if you can find my slide. And hi, Andrew. It's so great to be here, and I'm so thankful to the Metal Museum and to you for getting this show together. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, gosh, do you want to ask me any questions, or do you just want me to talk? I can think of things to say.
Well, let's hear you talk because I have ideas, but I want to hear from the
Okay.
artist.
Okay. Well, when you first told me about this idea, it took me a while to remember that that I had this piece, and it was so perfect. So the Mokume Hideaway, I'd made this piece about a few months earlier, and just the title Mokume Hideaway tells you that that's certainly my idea of home. For those that don't know me, Mokume Gane is the technique I do most of the time now. Pretty much every piece I do has mokume in it, and I've been doing metalwork since 1991, actually, but wasn't introduced to mokumegane until 2007. So when I found the technique, it was instantly where I felt at home. So the title of the show, No Place Like Home, made it clear to me that Mokame was what I should enter, because that is where I feel safe as an artist, and my visual vocabulary and all of that. But then there are so many layers to this. So I wrote down well, there's the two main things. Like there's the work, I could talk about the work, but then why is the work in this show? And those are the two, the two things. So I have to admit that I come being approached to be in a queer show makes one think about things. You mentioned the reluctance in terms of being outed, right? Oh, I'm labeled now, but I also struggle with participating in a show like this because I wish that it was a non-issue. Right. I wish that everybody just made their work and then their work was their work. And, wouldn't that be wonderful? But I realize that's kind of a place of privilege. I've managed in my early 50s now to construct a life where I'm very comfortable. I have a wife. I can walk down the street holding hands with her. I can talk about her at my at my salon appointment or something, and nobody's going to freak out and run out of the room. And that's wonderful, but there are countries where you can die for doing that. So there's that. Then there's also, should my work be in here? Because it's not really about being queer. It's my work. I love to make beautiful things that are take a great deal of skill and craft to make aesthetic objects. And so I hesitate for that reason. When I was in graduate school, my work was all about coming out. It was a whole show. There's like pieces, it's all a whole progression. And I worked through that, right? But I've come around to understand that it's important for my work to be in shows like these because I want to be part of the breadth of and the diversity of work that is created by queer people. And I think that if we make shows, if the only people that enter shows or participate in shows that are about being queer, that if they only put work in it that's really about that, then the public or allies or folks from the outside get this idea that we're all about that. When for a lot of us, it's really a very small part of our identity. And I don't mean that as a negative thing. I mean it as an important thing because it shows, hopefully, those that aren't part of this community how actually normal we are. So there you go. There are some of my thoughts about the show, and I could talk more about the pieces if you like as well. But for
Yes.
me,
So there's a couple things I wanted to kind of address on what you had mentioned just now. And this had come up in the curatorial process is what is queer artwork? And for me, coming up with a definition of what that is was important because that helped guide which pieces were selected for the show. And so for me, any work that a queer person makes is queer artwork. Um,
yeah.
and that seems broad and like super vague, but I think it's important because um, the things that happen in our lives help shape the way we see the world. And as an artist, I feel like we're chroniclers of the world around us and our experiences. So that is, maybe it's not the most like in your face thing, but it is a part of the making. And so it's imbued I know it's a little bit woo-woo, but it's a part of the work, whether you know it's there or not.
Right.
So for folks who don't know what mokame is, what is mokame gane?
Sure. Mokume Gane is a technique rather than a material. It can be made with any types of metals, actually. It was invented in Japan in the 1600s, but basically it's taking different colors of metal and fusing them together with time, heat, and pressure, no solder. And once they're layered, that's when the real artistic part comes. You create patterns by deforming the layers and abrading, alternately deforming and abrading the surface so that you get different patterns appearing on the surface. It's a technically challenging technique. And so for me, that's what keeps me interested in it. I'm someone who gets easily bored. And in working with Mokume since 2007, I've never gotten bored. That's for sure. So it was first done in Japan, making sword guards or subas. And I loved your comment, Andrew, about that, the woo-woo comment that it's in there whether you know it or not, because I rail against being defined and being put in boxes and all that. However, there are not a lot of women that do this kind of work. And I recently, this isn't in the show, but I made a suba and entered it in a show in Japan, and it was I was the only female maker of this sword furniture, and the only non-Japanese person as well. So I do feel that I've wandered into a space where not many folks of my gender are, and I certainly have had experiences throughout my career as a student and as a maker where I so wished that my gender could be a non-issue, and it often is, not overtly, but in spaces like in blacksmithing spaces where I know there are some makers I can't be alone with, because I'm a female and they're going to come up and get gross.
Oh,
Um, and that's I find that quite distressing. So anyway, and I'm so grateful to the guys that are not like that. I really appreciate that. And you'd think like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a lesbian. Shouldn't that stop them? No, it does not. And thankfully, I'm getting older, so that's helping. But just throughout my career, I've had to be aware of that, and I have missed opportunities because I was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. For instance, go be a part of wandering the streets in North Africa and be invited in and get to do some metal work because there are no women metal workers there. So that goes into more gender than it does to sexual identity. But there you go.
I think if anything, that shows there's more work to be done and kind of underlines why these shows like this are important. And I hope Laura's taking notes and is going to make a show, about that, about the gendered experience of maybe being a woman in, traditionally, not, I don't like that word traditionally, but historically
There you go.
male-dominated spaces,
Yeah, yeah.
which is kind of funny because it's not real. That's just because a lot of times in cottage industries, men and women both did the work. It's
Sure.
just men got the credit for it.
Mhm.
But so when we had kind of talked about this, one of the things that really had moved me about your work is that you are blending metals and you're bringing different metals together to make one cohesive piece. And I think that that's such a beautiful metaphor for our community because we are all so different. And I love that you made little tiny cups because I think, at least from when I was growing up, being gay or queer, we didn't actually use the word queer back then because it was a bad word. But now it's being celebrated. And so for me, I think that the cups are like a little celebratory thing. Like it's something where people come together and they're so intimate because they can be held in the hand. And there's like such a lovely scale to that. So it's something that is a very like, I don't know, communal aspect. And I love the idea that even though people are different and come from different backgrounds and have different ideas about their queerness or their metalwork, we can still come together as a community and be celebrated.
Mhm. Yeah, and I definitely, when I was looking at the sake cups and thinking, oh yeah, that really works. And I just, I have a hard time coming up with titles, and chosen family was one of my thoughts as a title, but it seemed too cheesy. But that's the idea of the four sake cups, because so many folks in the queer community are not able to be family with their birth family or their blood family because of being rejected by them. So they instead become a part of a chosen family who may be quite varied, in appearance and background and age and ethnicity and all of that. And so I really liked the idea of that the four cups that I made were all from different billets. So they're different different types of metal, different layering techniques, different even patterning techniques, different shapes. Even there's a little nick in the top of one that I left there because I was like, well, that's just the way sometimes your family members are like that. And but you love them all, yeah, so that's the idea behind the matched set. And the word matched set is meant to be as kind of a misnomer, because or a they are matched, because they belong together, not because they have all the same color and set like a traditional set, but because they have been chosen to they've chosen to hang out with each other.
That's beautiful. In one of the conversations that I had with Laura, we had talked about an author named Armistead Maupin who wrote the books Tales of the City. And if you don't want to read the books, you can also watch on Netflix. But anyways, one of the things that he talked about is the logical family. And like you were talking about, there is a lot of rejection that happens in the queer community um, from people who are not a part of it. And sometimes your biological family is not welcoming or accepting of who you are. So when you go out into the world, you have to find, I mean, I guess you don't have to, but it definitely helps. But you have to find your own family, so your own chosen or your logical family. And like you said, that family is could be very, very diverse and very varied. Um, so thank you so much for participating.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Do you have any other artists who are watching who would like to speak on their work?
Andrew, I'm not seeing any other volunteers, and I don't want to call anyone out and make them uncomfortable, but we're approaching about 15 minutes until the end. So I would love to open the floor to questions. If anyone
Okay.
would like to ask you a question or ask the artist a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat and I will share it with you, Andrew.
Okay. Um, can you pull up Kess piece? Because I think that,
Yes, this one. Yes.
or I should say pieces.
Yeah.
One of the things that we had kind of briefly talked about with in conversation with Anne was about uh, not necessarily being accepted in your home life. And I'm not going to talk about Kest's experiences because I feel like they're the ones that are best able to do that. But I followed Kest for a while now, and they've been very vocal about their experiences with homelessness um, and being a homeless person. And it's one of those things that is so heartbreaking in the queer community because I had to look up the statistics because they vary widely. It's something that isn't it's since things are self-reported, they sometimes people don't say and they don't identify out of safety, or they're flying so low under the radar that they aren't counted necessarily. But there are over 160,000 homeless LGBTQIA youth people right now. And that is a disproportionate amount of the population of homelessness or people with housing insecurities. So their rough estimates are anywhere from 11 to 40% of homeless people identify as LGBTQIA plus, and depending on the sources, that's 28%. That's wild. It just is so wild to me that that is something that happens. And not everybody has a loving or accepting home life, or they feel, that they have to go out on their own. So when I saw these pieces, it really moved me because for a number of reasons, but the houses have legs. So in my mind, and they have wings, and in my mind, they can be anywhere. It's not just rooted in one place. So I think there is something wonderful about that. And also, and it speaks to that. I don't know if Kest was specifically thinking about that when they're creating this work, but I see that. And for me, they also are related to the Baba Yaga fairy tales. And in those stories, the house that Baba Yaga lives in has chicken legs, and you have to answer riddles or it turns its door from you. So it's also a sense of protection in my mind. And the fact that these are based on starlings is kind of a, a thing that struck me because starlings were brought over here. And if you're in any kind of birding group, then you know that they're not necessarily the most popular of birds, even though they're really beautiful. And I kind of think that's a metaphor for the queer community in the sense that you can be the most beautiful, brilliant, bright, have your dappled feathers and oil slick coloring and shifting in the color like a rainbow and still be rejected. And no by no choice of their own, they were brought here and are now in some circles considered unpleasant things. So these pieces really moved me, and I love that there's two of them. There's a dynamic movement between both. There's like a conversation happening. I can see that as like there's not just one, but they're having like a little powwow talking. So yeah. So do we have any questions in the few minutes that we have left?
Yeah, I think so. Just a minute.
Um, so if you could pull up Morgan's piece, maybe that's a good thing that we can talk about. So addressing the idea of what home is, there's a lot of really different things that I kind of wanted to talk about. and in this exhibition. And one of those things is kind of like the iconography of the house. Like when you see this symbol, you know that that's a home. That's like it's something that's written into our visual vocabulary. So I thought that was important to include in the show. And the placement of this piece is amazing. It's simply amazing. And I think the exhibition team did a really smart thing to show it where they did, because it glows at certain times of the day. There's a glass, kind of that glass house in the middle is just beautiful. Um, if you could pull up
We
Keith's.
do have a question. Yeah, I'll pull this up and then do there's a question for Jacob. Do you want to?
Okay.
Okay, so Jacob, someone asked, how do you feel about your work being seen in a state that is actively wanting to ban drag?
Um,
And
so this is why I am starting this series, and interviewing drag queens from all over the South, primarily where all of these um, laws are like taking place and these bans are coming into play. Um, it's like it's like eradication of our home, our safe space, our teachers, our guiders, through all of it. And it infuriates me. I almost did not move to Texas, because they were getting rid of DE and I. Um, and then, I mean, Alabama's not any different. Um, and last year during We Are Here exhibition and during Memphis Pride, we all know that they passed, or they did not pass the drag ban, which was a huge celebration. And I wish every state would just leave it alone, um, and let people live their lives, you know? Uh, and that's what's really driving the force behind this work and getting voices out there that need to be heard. Um, yeah.
I think that it's important that this work is being seen, because a part of eliminating and making things illegal is the distortion of the narrative. And I feel like a lot of the queer community is being vilified, and their voices are being taken away. And it's exhibitions like this that empower us to tell our own stories. And there's a power in those stories because those are our stories. And when you get to know people, then you know that they're not what maybe the media or certain groups are trying to portray them as. Um, so I think it's so important for these exhibitions to happen because representation matters. It's something that allows us to tell our own stories. And I think that that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing that we're allowed to do.
thank you. Would you
Do we
like for me to go back to the other piece?
to
The
Keith's
piece?
piece? Well, I could talk about them
Oh,
all, but we only have an
oh, Keith.
hour, and
Okay.
that's the um
Yeah, that's true.
and I love all the pieces, you know. It's hard to pick any one favorite. Um, but I love this piece partly because it was kind of an unexpected journey to select this piece. Um, I had a original idea of showing a different piece from Keith, which was unfortunately unavailable. But if you are in New York City, it is on view at the Jewelry Library. There's a whole collection um, through um, through Gallery Loop. Am I saying that right? Anyways,
Yeah.
so if you want to see those pieces, you can definitely see this. And Keith had proposed this piece instead. And if you are from an Asian background, or my mom is from the Philippines, so this is something that kind of hits near and dear to me. But when you enter a home, you take your shoes off. And so when I saw this piece, it really, it definitely communicated to me as like a sense of home. Um, and if you know, kind of, it's something that um, that if you experience this, then you know that this is like your home now. You're comfortable. You're also not dragging in the outside world. You're kind of creating a safe space, and a space that is free of the outside world. But Keith has also written a little bit about this piece and about how it was the end of a relationship. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful tribute to that relationship that he had had. Um, and yeah. So did I see a question pop up? Or
A thank you to all the artists, Andrew, and the Metal Museum for this inspiring view of home from Marianne Rosie.
oh, thank you. Thank you, Marianne. One thing I will say is that the fun doesn't stop here. Um, so as we know, there's only such a small space to show and for a short time. And I want and I hope that this goes out into the world where whether you identify as queer or you're an ally, that you take an opportunity to share a piece on social media, use the hashtag no place like home exhibition, and be sure to tag me and the Metal Museum because we'd love to see this conversation. I know Laura has already participated, um, and she has a picture that is kind of similar to this piece. Um, and so I think it's just such a lovely thing that we all can kind of open those conversations about what home means to each of us. I think for this exhibition, it was important for the representation to happen. Also, it was important to dial down that specific um that specific facet of what home means, because otherwise the exhibition would be like the size of a football field and have a million objects. So I think this is a beautiful way of kind of like a gateway to explore more. And I definitely recommend checking out all of the artists. They're all doing amazing things. Matt unfortunately couldn't be here today because they're doing uh, 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 their own talk right now at this very moment. So check that out. If you're in Southwestern Pennsylvania, Anne is going to be teaching at Touchstone. So there are opportunities to learn from the artist. Katie Rurick just got back from Pocosin and is one of the leaders of the Alleghenies Metal Collective. So if you ever find yourself in Pittsburgh, look her up. And Fun Lola, their piece was uh, um, is a part of the permanent collection, but was shown in, was it Brooklyn?
Yes.
And we have some exciting things that we're cooking up. So be sure to look up all of the artists and follow them. And definitely keep an eye on this space for more exciting things to come.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in on Zoom today on a Friday, the first Friday of May. I'm sure it's springtime and you have lots going on, but thank you for being here with us and for showing up and talking through this exhibition with our wonderful curator. I do want to add in just a quick comment about sort of my own perspective of supporting Andrew as he's been curating this. It's been really interesting to see the conversations that you've been working through with other artists and thinking about, you know, the metal museum. Jacob, when you were describing like the nightlife for LGBTQIA plus as being sort of a safe haven and an outlet for creativity. And I know that institutionally, we always hope that the Metal Museum will also be like a safe haven and an outlet for creativity. And as some of you know, we are rounding out our capital campaign to expand into another building that is in a different location. And so we are also constantly talking about like what it means to have a home as an institution, and like, is that tied to a geographical place? Is it tied to objects? And really, at the end of the day, we're learning that it's tied to community and like the support and the conversations that you find in people who are driven by similar missions and creative interest. And so I hope that, you know, not only the conversation surrounding an uplifting queer metal artist that we've been working through, Andrew, I hope that that continues, of course, but I also hope that like this idea of home as a safe haven for creativity is something that we as an institution can continue to champion. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, of course, again to the Hyde Family Foundation, the Wingate Foundation, Arts Memphis, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and of course, to our wonderful donors and members. And if you're interested in becoming a member, please click through our website and become a member today. We often offer programming like this, of course, free to the public because of the phenomenal support that we receive through our large membership base. So thank you all for being here today. And this recording will be posted on the exhibition website in a couple of days. So if you have anyone who was unable to log in today, as it happened, I would encourage you to share this link with them and spread this around. And yes, of course, I'll be looking for those hashtags, No Place Like Home exhibition, and I'll reshare mine again through my own social media so that it can go out into the universe and connect with other ideas of home. So thank you everyone, and thank you Andrew, and I hope you come see it in person. Thanks everyone. Have a great Friday.